Good morning to you, Mr. Rushton Paray. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes,
Morning,
thank you
Mr.
for
Parry.
being with us.
How is Mayaro this morning?
Sunny. The weather is great. We had a wonderful weekend in terms of our beaches and so on. So I think all is good. We are saddened by the loss of the two young lives for the Mayaro, young man and woman who was killed in New Grant. That brought a bit of dark cloud over the community. But other than that, we're
How are
faring
the
well.
community members coping with that? It was so traumatic.
It's bad. It's bad. And this is just one of several that has occurred in the Mayaro constituency over the last couple of months. So we are seeing a rise in murders, which is something that you get at every now and then. But almost every week for the last couple of months, we've been having these events. I mean, one of the more tragic ones was the killing of the young businesswoman in San Fernando in front of Toyota. That was. I mean, I don't know, but the family is still reeling from that. Police is investigating. So, like the rest of the country, the entire of Trinidad and Tobago is now turning into a crime hotspot. So we listen carefully to what's happening at national security, at the police, and perhaps if time gives, we can talk a bit about that later on.
Now, we already started talking about this, so we may as well continue. There's some business leaders and some religious leaders who are calling for limited states of emergency. I don't know if that's allowed under our legislative framework. What are your thoughts on that as a mechanism to deal with burgeoning crime?
I have been speaking to quite a few business leaders in my network, quite a few senior retired police officers as well. And there seems to be a need from their perspective for a limited state of emergency. Now, my personal view is that a state of emergency is what you call a high impact, short duration tool. You use that to bring massive suppression of movement in a certain place, whether it's an entire country, whether it's in a few areas, but it is what you do inside of that state of emergency. We had the Attorney General come to the Parliament and say, listen, he knows the 200 gangs, 200 or 300 gangs, he knows every single one of them. He wanted us to agree to legislation in terms of the anti-gang. We went back and forward. Eventually, we gave them some leeway on that. Nothing has happened. What do you do inside of the state of emergency? What can we do to lock down the borders, suppress movement around the borders? In a state of emergency, the police has powers of search and seize without warrants. So you don't have to wait. There's a feeling that when police has to get a warrant to go and search somebody's house, somewhere in the network, the information is leaked and the people take up all the gun and drugs and so on and go hide it by the neighbor, banana tree under some kind of tree somewhere. So during the state of emergencies, you have to act and go and stop and seize and use your power of, I wouldn't call it martial law, but your power to act without having too much of information being shared on the network where it can leak. So the long and short of it is that, a limited state of emergency to me can be used as a stopgap, short, high impact tool, but it's what you do inside of it makes it.
That is accommodated for in our constitution, our laws.
Yes, it is. Because when we say limited, it means that you can either limit it in time, because you can tell it can go from one day to another day, or you can limit it in geographic location, like when we had a state of emergency around the Red House to seize a Speaker of the House. So it is accommodated for in our legislation.
How would you respond to those who suggest, well, you have a limited time or limited geographic jurisdiction state of emergency, but the people that you're seeking to apprehend with the police increased powers are not going to stay in those areas from the time they hear a state of emergency in X place. They're moving out because they listen to the news too. They're not going to stay if they know it's in jurisdiction A. They know what's coming to that jurisdiction. They know that jurisdiction has been put under state of emergency to enable certain actions by law enforcement. Why would I stay there?
Well, that's a good point. It's a good point. And I do not think a geographic state of emergency ought to be used for more than 1 day or 2 days or in specific circumstances. Because you're right, they're going to move. So like when the police comes and says, look, we're going to turn Mayaro into a point of interest for the TTPS and we're going to be putting more patrols and more police officers on the ground. Well, all right. Well, if you're coming Mayaro, I go in and head Maruga, or I'm going to head to San Fernando. So again, it comes back to a methodology. It comes back to a strategy and which version of it that you want to allow your your anti-crime strategy to work best. So I can't see a geographic state of emergency for one particular area.
Coupled with which, police have the ability now, if they feel Mr. X, Mr. Smith, nebulous name, is involved in gang activity and or serious crime, they can go to a judge to get a warrant and seize the evidence. This country has experienced already states of emergency or a state of emergency where it was applied. People went in, arrested people, and they ended up suing the state because no evidence was procured and no prosecutions came out of that. What is to stop that from happening again? And if you have the intelligence that's accurate now, what's stopping you now from getting a warrant and going and seize the persons and or the evidence to support your arrest and charge?
Well, it comes back to fixing the issues within the operators of the judicial system. I always maintain the fact that you can throw legislation, you can throw technology in national security. But if the basic issues of the operators, the issues of the police, the issues of forensics, I remember in 2016, the Minister of Finance came and he talked about a $70 million injection into building a new forensic laboratory in Trinidad and Tobago. It is 2024. And the only thing that has been done in forensics is put on a 40-foot container with air condition to put samples. So we have to fix these issues. And you're right, Paul. You know, my understanding of the failure of the 2013 or 2014 SOE is that the police was under so much of pressure that they went ahead very exuberantly and they arrest people from a side.
Under pressure from whom?
Well, the public, because the public wants to see action. I understand sometimes in these meetings, the leadership say, fellas, go out there and do your job and put pressure, and they went out there. And you're right, proper evidentiary strategies were not put in place, and most of the cases, I understand, that was fought in the court, they lost and they had to pay these guys. You need to be smarter in that. I can't recall whether the legislation itself was faulty. It's just that the police may have not done the right thing in terms of making the arrest. If you have to do that this time, they have to be a more particular in terms of how they follow due process to arrest people.
Yeah. Mr. Paray, I want to just focus a little bit on your district, your area, your parliamentary district. And just a correction before, the limited state of emergency where the Speaker of the House wasn't at Red House. It was where the resident was. It was where she lived.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Gotcha.
The issue of your area, I know some years ago, Mayaro featured heavily in the news concerning immigrants coming across and on the beach and all manner of things. I think you had a councillor there who was very much in the news about what's happening there. What is your area like? Do you still have those issues down there?
No, I have not heard of any mass movement of immigrants via the seaports and so on. We have heard of one or two times, I think, in the last year, where police would have intervened in certain areas where they had information of mass gathering of more so Venezuelans, whether they came in via boat or they were transported from another location to Mayaro. I won't have that information. But what you do have in Mayaro as a constituency, you do have a proliferation of Venezuelan migrants who are domiciled in the area. There's a lot of Venezuelans who work in the private sector. You go into the supermarkets, gas stations, and so on. You do see quite a bit of them. In terms of whether they are causing a high impact on the local economy, I do feel there is some stress being put on in terms of the job market. I do hear from time to time where our locals are complaining that, a lot of these low-end non-technical jobs are going to Venezuelan migrants. And, what can we do about that? As long as they are registered with the Ministry of National Security and they carry the necessary paperwork, businesses are allowed to hire them. So
is it then that you are satisfied with the efforts of the national security operatives in your area? Because I'll tell you what we don't hear about in Mayaro, and it may be happening, but we don't hear about it. Extortion, home invasions, and so on. You don't hear those things, that kind of news coming out of Mayaro. Is it that you don't have it, or it's suppressed, being suppressed?
Oh, it's there. It's there. I can tell you, there are quite a bit of home invasions that are happening. Home invasions, some of them get reported, not all. And I want to be very careful how I tell you this, because it's a very sensitive issue. There are home invasions that occur where women and children are sexually interfered with. And culturally, in some homes, you're not going to report that to the police because there is a cultural taboo issue when your women folks are violated in your home. And that is happening throughout the country. I've spoken, privately or one-on-one to police officers, and they will tell me flat, Paray, there is a serious issue and people are not reporting it because of that factor. And that is something that's happening. That has to be addressed. Issue of extortion. We have had a few extortion cases reported in Mayaro by some businessmen. There is a feeling that the loss of life of the young lady in San Fernando in front of Toyota, there may have been some extortion issues involved in that. Now, obviously, families keep those things quietly. It's not in the media because the police is doing their investigation, and I am all one for allowing the police to do their work. But to answer your question, Wendell, yes, there are cases of extortion. Yes, there are cases of home invasions. Unfortunately, it doesn't make the news. Several of them is not reported to the police.
Mr. Paray, Parliament resumes today for the last sitting of the fourth session, both houses. And the fourth session will be prorogued and the fifth session will start. How is your relationship with the Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa and the UNC leadership at this time?
She has not spoken to me directly since the campaign. I know she's been in and out of the country. I have had several communications, one way as it may be, to the General Secretary, to the Chairman of the party. I've raised several matters, personal matters as well with them for their attention. I've also reminded them that the issues that raised during the campaign, we need to address them. I shared with the Chairman, the GenSec, and the Chief Executive Officer, that's Dr. Gopi Singh. I have shared with them a lot of correspondences that I would have had with the political leader in the run-up to the election. I shared a document with them with all the issues that I raised that I think we needed to address. For their response, for their attention, unfortunately, sadly, I have received no response from them either. So I go to Parliament this morning. I go with very optimistic that when I meet my colleagues, I will, if the opportunity arises, to engage them on some of those matters. And we see how it goes. To answer the question about relationship, I remain in good standing as far as I am aware. With my colleagues, I bear no animosity to anybody. Very respectful. There are, places and positions in the party. Fellows who hold offices, and I continue to remain respectful to those offices. You
said the correspondence was one, which means there was no response from either Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa or the executive leadership. Right. There have been reports in the media that I can't confirm. You tell me if it's true that there are meetings that are taking place that you nor your other four colleagues have not been invited to. Would that be correct? So far, even prior to the internal elections, I can speak for myself that there had already been a lack of participation on my part, not because I wanted it. For my part, in terms of Monday night meetings, in terms of opposition press briefings, there were very little requests for my attendance. Now, I always find that strange because outside of MP Tanku, who shadows finance and economy, I shadow trade and industry, digital transformation. I do some energy. I do some tourism. I felt since these were key components of our national framework and perhaps key components of our diversification desire, I thought those are important areas to speak on. Prior to that, you would have had a few cottage meetings after the elections. You would have had election strategy meetings. You would have had
these budget consultations, I can tell you that I never received any official communications from the party to participate in these. I just want to clear
Is
up
this
an
unusual? Had you been invited in previous years? Is this unusual?
Absolutely. As the MP sitting at the head of the constituency, normally the communication comes to me, and then I disseminate to the members of council at the regional corporation, which, as you know, the MRCRC is is politically run by the United National Congress. So I do have a sitting chairman of the corporation and 6 councillors. Normally, that conversations happen through me to them, and then we
Would
have
you
a
go so
response
far as
back.
to suggest it, to say that you think you've been sidelined?
That's an understatement. I think they've created a hostile working environment, at the end of the day, by not communicating. But I can tell you this. As a disciplined member of any organization, when I saw these things, and I want to use the example of the budget consultations. When I saw the date, which I was never asked, it was the 14th of August. It was published on our social media. I immediately wrote the chairman and the general secretary, advising both of them that, look, I am seeing this date bandied about for a budget consultation. However, since there was no conversation with me, my travel schedule has already been booked and I will not be in the country. However, if you can bring it up or if you can do it after, I will participate. However, if you can't move your date, allow me to offer my assistance in any way, whether I have to pay for chair and table and PA system and so on, I'll be happy to participate. I received no response. If I got a response, it probably was okay. Now, in the business world, no response means no problem. So I went ahead on my vacation, and that was the end of it. So it really tells me that, look, they're prepared to have these things without me. And then you had this election strategy meeting, which was a Sunday evening, where Mayaro was highlighted as one of their key areas. But it made no sense to the organizers that you notify the MP for the area. I saw it like everybody else on Sunday morning when some advertisement on social media came out. I don't think it was even an advertisement, but I think I saw some photos or the other of the preparation of the place. So again,
so there's an election strategy meeting, and Mayaro is identified as a key constituency in the upcoming election. And I guess no screening. You've put forward your name to represent the constituency once again.
Yes.
Do you interpret that as maybe whoever the choices maybe have been invited to the meeting and not yourself?
Well, I can't speak on what's happening, from the other side. I can tell you that, it's undeniably very strange that you would have that meeting without me. Now, that being said, Mayaro has a very sound and well-oiled election machinery. We've done remarkably well over the last 20 odd years. The success of the elections in Mayaro is not pinned to any one particular person. But at the end of the day, we have a formula that has worked for the last 2 general elections. You have a candidate, a sitting candidate, an incumbent that has done reasonably well. So much so that I think both the PNM and the UNC really know what to do with me. My understanding is that the PNM screening was put a halt because they're waiting to see what the UNC going to do with Paray before they make a decision. Now that tells me that I would have done something very good over the last 8.5, 9 years to have the PNM in a bit of quandary as to a selection based on what's happening.
Yeah. I think the PNM, and I would have mounted it on this program, recognize that you are in fact a good candidate. You have been in fact a good MP. You know what I mean? And you have been in fact spreading the resources amongst everybody in the area. Those are the things that I've heard, right? I've never heard anything bad about you. But let me ask you this. Is it that you have no friend there in that little group of UNC people who would tell you what's going on or advise you how to operate and so on?
I have a lot of friends, but let me tell you, I straddle with the reality of real life against what's happening in the political arena. So prior to the internal elections, the very same men who came out and wrote lovely letters against me, those who stood on the political platform and, poked fun and jabbed me, they are the very same ones who would come on the side and say, Parry, and I agree with you, you know, boy, this lady had to go and all this kind of foolishness. They understand the challenges in the party. But yet,
And they are sitting
none
in
of them.
peace now?
No,
They are
no.
sitting
Put
in
a
peace?
put a pause. Put a pause. You just said,
Mhm.
Mr. Parry, I agree with you, boy. That lady had to go. What does that
Yeah.
mean?
That means they understand that she has outlived her usefulness in the leadership of the party and that she has to move on. Now, understand this. I have never said from day one that anybody had to step down, pack a suitcase, and jump on a plane. There is a constitutional way for the evolution of leadership in political parties. The election that was held 3 months ago is part of that evolutionary construct for a change of the leadership. Leadership is not only the political leader. And there is a political leader election that is due in 2025. Now, some may say that you can't have a leadership election the same year as a general election. Well, we proved that wrong in 2010 when there was a leadership election sometime in January. And in May of 2010, the People's Partnership under Mrs. Prasad Bissasa's leadership won 28 or 29 seats.
Yeah, but that was not scheduled election. That was a snap election.
Agreed. But the point was I'm talking about the leadership election. The leadership of the UNC. That was a constitutionally due election which happened within 6 months. So to say that we can't have an election next year with a general election that is due probably in August or September, October, November, sometime around there, it's really a weak argument. Whether it will happen or not, we left.
In the past, we've asked you directly your thoughts on Mrs. Prasad Bissasa's leadership, and you've said you were non-committal, and you were saying, well, the leadership means the leadership of the party.
Yeah.
A couple of minutes ago, you said, Parry, I agree with you, boy. That lady had to go, making a direct reference to Mrs. Prasad Bissasa and thinking that, well, she's outlived time as leader. If Mrs. Prasad Bissasa is hearing this, how do you think she's going to respond to that? You have made a direct statement saying that the sitting leader, who has quite a bit of sway in the party, has outlived her usefulness as leader, and you are hoping that the party now continues to embrace you, embraces you into the next election. How do you think that is going to reconcile? I
can't say what she's thinking in her mind. If I were to judge what she's thinking from the last 3 months, she's already tossed me out. So, but the point that I want to make, just 1 second, right? There was a question earlier on that, the relationship with my colleagues. That conversation about this lady has to go, right? That's part of a wider conversation. And I am telling you, every single one of them, from Dr. Munila, I'll come right back. I will not engage in the exact conversations we would have had with all of them. But the consensus is that there is a feeling, and the country has that feeling, the wide, broad majority of UNC supporters have been saying, they say it on social media, they write letters to the editor every day, that if we go into a general elections with Mrs. Prasad Bissasa as the leader of the party, we stand a chance of losing much more seats than we go in with. Now, I mean, 1 man probably wrong, 10 men probably wrong, 100,000 people can't be wrong. And you can't judge the election results based on what is the gut feeling of the country, of the wider 350 or 375,000 UNC supporters that we feel that we have based on the last general elections. But I'm saying there is a way to test that through the constitutionally due arrangements of the party. And I reiterate it. This is not about Parry or Munilal or anybody. This is about asking the membership. And if we have a leadership election tomorrow and the election, however they frame it, however they do it, puts back Mrs. Prasad Bissasa, well, we go down to the election with Mrs. Prasad Bissasa and we hope for the best.
No, immediately before you and the PNM and the UNC and the independents is a 5th parliamentary term. The 4th session in the House of Representatives, there seemed to have been some uncertainty as to how yourself and the 4 other persons, excuse me, who have been described by some as dissidents, would vote for critical upcoming legislation. Is there any uncertainty? Because you have already stated that you've been left out of consultations of budget. You're not receiving responses to your correspondences. How do you think the next session will play out in terms of consensus from the opposition benches for you and your 4 colleagues, for whom some suggest there's a question mark where legislation is put to the floor?
Yeah.
Are you going to
toe the
vote
line?
with conscience,
Toe the line.
or are you going to vote in line with the party?
So 2 things is going to happen today. I speak for myself. I can tell you after the internal election was over, there is no more United Patriots as an organization. I do not give instructions to anybody. Everybody is free to operate on their own. That is over and done with. So I can speak for me. Today, I go to Parliament warm, open, responsive, receptive, as I have always been. I speak to all of my colleagues in the last few sittings of Parliament before we went on the recess. I spoke to everybody. I meet you on the corridor. We engage in
So how will you know what the party's position is on a particular bill if you're not being communicated with?
Well,
just
you answer the
everybody else voting
question.
and vote?
You've answered the question. No, but what I'm saying, the relationship will dictate how I operate. Because if I'm sitting under the hand of the whip will tell me if I'm under his hand today, because I will ask him. If I'm under the hand of the whip, well, then I expect all the courtesies, all the correspondence, all the information as every other member. If I am not getting that, well, then I am going to ask. If I'm not under the whip, well, then mean I will be forced and allowed to respond and act in my own deliberate way.
But is that a requirement, Mr. Paray, that the whip tells you, listen, you need to follow the dictates of the whip? Is that a requirement?
Absolutely. That is the Westminster system. If you are sitting, you notice there have been 2 or 3 occasions where the Prime Minister, or in this case the Leader of the Opposition, did say, I release the hand of the whip.
Mm-hmm.
And when you release the hand of the whip, every member can vote in their own deliberate judgment.
Yes.
Now, I will tell you, I will continue to debate whatever is in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago first.
Mm-hmm. But who selects you? Who will select you then to participate in a debate? Wouldn't it be the whip?
So that is how it normally happens. And I'm glad you raised that question. So I want to put something out on the table now.
Mm-hmm.
The system by which I have operated in for the last 9 years is that a debate comes to the Parliament. There is a type of lawn tennis that plays. It depends on who speaks on the other side. Then you speak. So, for instance, in a budget debate, the substantive minister will speak, and then the substantive shadow will respond. So,
right.
In a debate, I would normally deal with matters that Paula would normally bring, because she's the Minister of Trade and Industry. So, I would normally speak if she brings a bill. If in the budget debate, they would normally hold me back until Paula speaks, and then I respond to her. So the rule is that the whip will come and tap you on your shoulder and say, look, prepare to speak after. So you wait, you hold the line, you take your notes, and you wait till your substantive line minister comes, and you respond. However, during the campaign, the political leader stood up and said that the 5 of us, the 5 MPs, that we were lazy, we don't talk in Parliament, and that we can jump up at any time and speak. That's what she said. So one of my correspondence to the chief whip and the party was that, look, I wanted clarity on that, because there was a case made during the campaign that we don't like to talk, we just run and hide from Parliament. And as a matter of fact, you can go on the parliamentary website. In 8.5 years, I've spoken 70 times, 70. I've spoken on 70 bills, 23 motions, right? So I don't know if that is lazy, right? But I wanted clarity going forward from today. What is the rule?
But Mr. Paray, even if you don't get instructions from the whip, and you feel that you're in a space that you're unsure, the actual rule in the standing orders is the person who gets the eye of the chair.
The eye of the chair.
So you don't have to wait for any whip or any leader. And if you feel you have a contribution to make, and you feel to quote unquote jump up, you can.
Yes, agreed. I am totally agreed. But in the current construct, and it happens in the PNM as well, on the independent bench, you are beholden to nobody. So you could do what you want. But inside of the Westminster system that sits on
There's
the
a
government
convention. There's a
benches,
convention.
it's a convention that you wait until you are told.
But if you never,
Right.
never land,
Now, if I never land from today, and because as I say, I plan to ask that question to my chief. I have a wonderful working relationship with my chief. Now, if today my chief
Who's that? Who's that? Dr. Lee? Is that
David Lee.
Dr. Lee?
Dr. Lee. Dr.
Okay.
Lee is our chief whip, yes. I have the greatest respect and admiration in the world for what he does inside the parliament.
Yeah, but he is going to do anything the leader tells him to do.
Well, I can't speak on his behalf. I can tell you what is my expectation of him. If he tells me, Mr. Paray, MP Paray, kindly hold until you are instructed to speak, okay, no problem. I will wait. But if time goes on and you are living up to what you say, I go jump up and talk because that's what the people on Mayaro send me to do.
Well, I don't disagree with that at all.
Mr. Parry, there had been some advertisements in the newspaper and on social media identifying, is it Up TNT, Wendell?
Which one is that?
There's a logo seemingly of a new political party that people will either erroneously or not inaccurately linking yourself and your 4 colleagues to. Do you have anything to do with that new political entity, if it is a political entity?
No. I saw that like everybody else on social media. I queried, I tried to find out who is UPTT. I can tell you categorically that I have no part, no role, no conversation in that. As of today, I remain strongly a member of the United National Congress. I have no plans to leave or jump to anywhere. I do believe as a sitting member of the party internally that I have a right to shake any tree that I want inside of the party now going forward to drive the changes that I want. Coming out like what some other people did. Most recently, we'd have had some, cross the floor and so on. Well, that's fine. I can't instruct anybody what to do or not to do. But I feel that you can be more effective sitting inside the ship than pelting bottle and stone from across the road. So I am strong. I still remain UNC. And until the day that the party feels that I am of no value to them, well, then so be it. But today, I have nothing to do with any other political
Have any overtures been made by any other political entity to your self?
All. From the PNM come right back. And I basically politely tell everybody no. Right? I have been speaking to every
What is the nature
party.
of these overtures from the PNM?
Boy, Rushton, you fed up with the UNC yet? Come by me. You have good ideas. And I said, no, my ideas will remain in the party that I joined over a little under 10 years ago because it's a philosophy that I agreed and I subscribed to. Right? I've now come out of a campaign where I promoted the conversation that a stronger UNC is a stronger Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, I'm not going to flip-flop like some people. 1 minute here, you're there, 1 minute here, tomorrow, you're all over the place. No. I remain strongly committed to the philosophy of the party that I joined 10 years ago. And let me make this clear. I have no problem with my party either. My party is the only vehicle that can take us to government and straighten out the mess that the PNM has left us in. I have a challenge with the leadership decision of my party.
I'm not going to ask that question because if you want your party to go into government to sort out the mess, as you say, that there is, how could you do that with the current leader that you clearly are not supportive of?
Well, the issue is not being supported. Is what do? You continue to gnaw away at these issues, which I am doing. And because there is no campaign for public consumption, I have been writing emails. I've been sending messages to various persons in the leadership of the party. Unfortunately, they're not responding to me. But I'm doing my part. I am doing my part to say, hey, we ought not to be doing this thing. Look, the color change of the party with the jerseys. I asked them, well, whose mandate was that? Did you get approval from the NATEX? Was approval given? Is anything in writing? Did you talk to the wider membership about this? You can have a unilateral decision by just going and frame up and change the color scheme of the party. Your brand is important. And don't tell me it is because there's a particular different type of consumption in certain areas of the country. No, the people of this country will support leadership and leadership ideas that are innovative, no matter what color you're in. So those are the kind of questions.
Mr. Parry, are you willing to take some calls from our audience?
Absolutely.
All right.
Mr. Let me ask this one question before
I guess this Rushton Paray.
As we open the lines. Because you on the ground, you're in the Mayaro area, you understand the politics, you know that you've gone against the party and the leadership and that they'll probably be looking for someone. Have you been able, have that person been identified as yet?
No, I have had, I cannot tell you today that there has been any search for anyone. I do know in the last screening, application for screening, there were 1 or 2 persons who have filed for Mayaro. But
You mean
outside
including
of that,
yourself?
including myself, which is normal. There have been 1 or 2, up to 3 persons would have screened there were 5 persons screened in 2015. There was 3 persons screened in 2020. And I understand there are about 2 or 3 persons together with myself that is going to be screened. Whether the party has a vigorous campaign to look for a candidate, I have seen no evidence of that so far.
So no names whispering out there as to who they putting in place of Rushton.
Outside of the traditional names that would have filed, I have heard no new names to say, well, another business person or another senior professional person in the community who has not been in the political landscape. I have had no information on that. I have heard nothing about that.
Honest answer. What do you think? What do you think are the chances of the UNC if Rushton Paray is not the candidate?
I have a strong feeling that if Rushton Paray is not the candidate in 2025, there will be a bit of fallout. Whether the UNC can lose the seat, I think there's a high possibility that they can. There's a feeling inside the party that Mayaro is a safe seat. I can tell you that in 8.5 years, I've moved Mayaro from a marginal seat to a safe seat. So whether they feel that any candidate that they put, as good or bad as they may be, that they can win, that is what I believe is the thinking inside of the party. I can tell you from outside, I have indicated my intention to my election machinery that works for me, that I am prepared to contest the election in 2025, and I have full support from the vast majority of the election machinery here in Mayaro.
All right, we do have a call. Good morning.
Hello, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning to the guest of the parliament.
Morning.
That's interesting to me. You said the constitution in the UNC was how you can go about in terms of Dr. Pollack, the question that support from the police who are talking. So, how can you go about such a constitution if you look at it? Leader endorsement to the executive publicly. She publicly endorsed the NATEC executive that is in power right now. So I want you to constitution gives you or what this area in terms of the constitution gives you after the leadership of the UNC.
He's breaking up badly though.
Yeah.
I didn't catch the question at all.
So the question is, what caller? We're breaking up.
The question is, where in the constitution in the US Mr. Has the powers to challenge the leadership?
Okay, so if I get it, where is the in the Constitution has the power to challenge the leadership? The Constitution provides for a NATEX election every 2 years and a leadership election, a political leader election every 3 years. The 3-year anniversary for the leader, the political leader election, is due in early March, April next year. And that's how the Constitution is, to answer the question. I'm not sure if it's something else you're trying to get at, but that is how the Constitution is laid out. 2 years for NATEX, 3 years. And there's a reason why the framers of the Constitution put a 1-year separation, because they don't want a NATEX that is at the beck and call of a political leader. They wanted to create a line somewhere where you can have a check and balance between the dictates of a political leader and the leadership of the party. And that was the reason for that. So there is a 1-year difference constitutionally.
There's a question here in the chat, Mr. Paray. Will you go up as an independent candidate if you're not selected by the UNC?
It is not my intention at this time. I remain very, very committed to the UNC. I do believe I am still the best chance. I remain optimistic that whatever is the relationship, at the end of the day, I think, we are a young political party. I think these are teething problems. We have to learn to be mature about things. And, in business sometimes as a businessman, sometimes the relationship you have with someone, an engineering staff, a technical person, may not be the best, but they bring the best value to the business. And sometimes we have to swallow our pride sometimes in terms of the relationship you may have with that person. And you allow them to do the work that they've been trained for to make your business effective and profitable.
Earlier
if
on, you said you think the UNC is the best vehicle to move the country forward.
Yes.
If you are not selected, will you show your support behind whomever is selected by the NATEC?
I will do whatever it takes to ensure that the UNC has the best possible chance to win the general election in 2025.
Okay, interesting. Now, do we have any more calls, Steve?
No, I kind of reset, so it'll take about a minute again.
Mr. Paray, thank you for being with us this morning and making yourself available as usual. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.